Imagine a single building that held the internet. Every book, every map, every scientific paper, every play and poem that human beings had ever written, gathered in one place. Now imagine watching it burn. For 2,000 years, we have told the story of the Library of Alexandria as history's greatest tragedy. But the truth of how we lost it is stranger than the legend, and far more unsettling, because the library did not die in a fire. It died the way knowledge usually dies, slowly, quietly, while everyone assumed someone else was taking care of it. The story begins around 300 BC, in a brand new city on the Egyptian coast. When Alexander the Great died, one of his generals, Ptolemy, seized Egypt and decided his capital would rule the world, not just through grain and gold, but through knowledge. His dynasty began collecting books the way other kingdoms collected territory. The methods were ruthless. Every ship that docked in Alexandria's harbor was searched, not for weapons, but for scrolls. Any book found on board was seized and copied. The owner got the copy back. The library kept the original. Ptolemy III borrowed the priceless master texts of the great Greek tragedies from Athens, paid an enormous deposit, and then simply kept them, forfeiting the deposit. The fine was worth less than the knowledge. At its height, the library may have held 500,000 scrolls, in an age when a wealthy man might own a dozen. Attached to it was the Mouseion, a research institute where the ancient world's greatest minds worked. Funded by the crown, fed by the state, and freed to do nothing but think. What they achieved there still staggers us. Eratosthenes, the library's chief librarian, calculated the circumference of the Earth using shadows and geometry, and got it right to within a few percent. Aristarchus proposed that the Earth orbits the Sun, 18 centuries before Copernicus. Herophilus mapped the human nervous system. Euclid wrote the Elements, the mathematics textbook that would be used for the next 2,000 years. So what happened? The famous story blames Julius Caesar. In 48 BC, trapped in Alexandria's civil war, Caesar set fire to the ships in the harbor. The fire spread to the docks and, the legend says, consumed the library. It makes a perfect story. One man's war, one afternoon, the world's memory in ashes. But the record does not support it. Caesar's fire probably burned warehouses of scrolls near the harbor, a real loss, but not the death blow. Writers who visited Alexandria decades later still describe the library operating. Scholars still worked there. Whatever Caesar destroyed, the institution survived him. The real killers were less dramatic. Budget cuts, as later kings and Roman emperors lost interest in funding scholars. Purges, when rulers expelled intellectuals who backed the wrong side. The slow decay of papyrus in humid sea air, which meant every scroll had to be recopied every century or two, forever, by someone willing to pay for it. When the copying budget dies, the books die with it. One generation of neglect at a time. The library's last chapters were violent. In the 3rd century, the Emperor Aurelian's war in Alexandria devastated the palace quarter where it stood. In 391, Christian mobs demolished the Serapeum, the daughter library and temple, as paganism was outlawed. And in 415, the mathematician Hypatia, the city's last great symbol of classical learning, was murdered in the street by a mob. By then, there was likely nothing meaningful left to destroy. Add up what vanished. Of the estimated 123 plays of Sophocles, 7 survive. Of Aeschylus, 7 again, out of perhaps 90. The heliocentric works of Aristarchus, gone, known only from other people's summaries. Entire sciences had to be rediscovered from scratch 1,000 years later. Some historians argue the loss set civilization back centuries. We will never know, and that is precisely the point. And here is the uncomfortable part. We like the fire story because it lets us off the hook. A fire is an accident, a villain, a single bad day. The truth is that Alexandria's knowledge died because generation after generation decided that preserving it was someone else's problem. Not evil, just neglect, compounding like interest. If that sounds distant, consider our own libraries. The average webpage lasts a couple of years before it vanishes. Films from cinema's first decades are mostly lost. Data formats from the 1980s are already unreadable. We produce more information than any civilization in history, and we are arguably worse at keeping it. In 2002, Egypt opened the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, a vast modern library built near the ancient site, a granite sun rising out of the same harbor. It is a beautiful monument. It is also a reminder the ancients did not lose their library in a day, and rebuilding it took 22 centuries. The Library of Alexandria teaches one lesson above all. Knowledge does not survive on its own. It survives because every single generation, someone chooses to pay for the copying. The fire is a myth, the neglect is real, and the neglect is always a choice. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe and help keep the copying going.